We have another minute or so. Yes. Ah, sorry. Sorry, I was looking away. Should we start or do you want to wait? What do you feel like,
Yeah, we
Anthony?
should wait. Well, we're missing Elizabeth, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so let's wait a minute,
Okay,
a bit.
fair enough.
Uh,
You caught me looking away. I was looking at something else.
oh, okay. Ed, have you heard from Elizabeth?
I have not, but let me check my email. I've been back and forth out of the office. Oh, looks like I got an email about it 52 minutes ago. Like I
Yeah,
said,
but that was,
yeah, I just been back and forth out of the office, so I've been away from my email most of the day.
yeah, I saw that one. No, that was something else. So no,
Yeah.
nothing about not being able to attend.
No, nothing about that. No, nothing about that. No. Maybe she's having trouble dialing in. I see something from Alita, but that's for later.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Maybe she's just having trouble signing in. Um, Want to give her like a couple minutes or?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
What are we doing here? Okay.
Tell you what, I'll give Elizabeth 2 minutes, a couple minutes, and I'll reload my coffee and come back, and I guess we
And
can
then
get.
we'll start.
We'll start. Okay, give her 2 minutes while I dash.
I tried calling her and no one picked up.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. I was just about to do the same, so.
Perfect.
All right, then let's start and then we'll
Perfect.
uh then we'll send out a search party after. Okay, go ahead, Ed.
Hi, welcome everybody to the May 27th meeting of Community Board Aids Zoning Development and Housing Committee meeting. I am Ed Hartzog, one of the co-chairs. Anthony Cohen, another one of our co-chairs, is here raising his hand. We've been waiting for our third co-chair, Elizabeth Ashby, who we expect to be signing on at some point along the way. Anyway, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, our very able assistant, Kevin Wu from the board office, can give you the rundown on the rules for Zoom meetings with Community Board 8. And when he's done with that, we'll turn it over to Anthony to introduce our first guest, who many of you already know, who will be, spoiler alert, George James. Kevin, I'll leave it to you to do the intro, the usual rundown of how we do things here.
If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you're currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for Ed and Anthony and the presenters as we move through the agenda. As we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the react icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are calling in on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participants section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Well, Ed spoiled my big introduction.
Sorry.
But that's quite all right. But we're going to go right now to George James, who appears to already be unmuted. And so take it away, George.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. Let me share my screen. Okay, you can see that, right?
Yep.
All right, super. Well, thanks for inviting me here. Here today to talk about land use actions, land use initiatives that are going on in New York City right now from various different sources. And it came from a memo that my office wrote up earlier this year that I essentially wrote up to keep everything straight because there's so many things going on. And these are the 6 things we're going to talk about today. The first four will be relatively short. The last 2, I'm going to get into some details. The thing about what's 2025 is, we just finished at the end of 2024 the enormous City of Yes efforts, right? All 3 of them ended by the December 2024, and new ones are starting right up. So we could relax or not. but the city is going to keep moving forward. So let's get right into it. So the first one, the Manhattan Plan. It is a series of zoning and policy changes that are designed to add 100,000 housing units to Manhattan. It's about 11% of the total housing units that we have currently. And that includes the 10,000 units that's already been announced with Midtown South and 100 Gold Street. So that leaves another 90,000 units, roughly, to go somewhere else in Manhattan. The city has repeatedly said that they want to upzone parts of Manhattan, but couldn't because of the 12 FAR cap. The 12 FAR cap is mostly gone now, and we now have 15 and 18 FAR residential districts that can replace our 10 districts. And when we do that and map an R11 or R12, that'll trigger mandatory inclusionary housing, which in areas that are uncommon right now. In District 8, there are very few MIH areas. And when that happens, new housing will require affordable housing in the developments. So when is it happening? There was a meeting last week where DCP said it would be starting next month. Public engagement will be starting next month. So it will be rolled out very soon. So we'll be getting details. And so there's not much sense to speculate what's going to be in it until we get those details. So we're going to be getting them soon. But I will say this, is that in terms of the context, there's things happening right now, right? Midtown South, it allows FARs up to 21.6. 100 Gold Street, which has a planning for an 18 FAR. East 125th Street at 125 in Lexington. They're planning, the application just certified last Monday for a 15 FAR district in East Harlem. And then on Central Park North, a 14 FAR district or building is proposed in a GPP, not a rezoning, but a general project plan on state-owned property on Central Park North. Okay, number 2, City of Yes for Families. What is it? It's a series of zoning changes specifically to address the needs of families. So these would be text changes, not map changes. So expand the FRESH program, and change privately owned, publicly accessible open spaces, or POPs, and expand the transit bonus. And the reason is, I think, fairly obvious. The idea of more grocery stores in City of Yes for economic opportunity. We expanded the FRESH program area, and this will probably expand it even further. The FRESH program area gives free FAR or zoning bonuses for the provision of grocery stores that sell fresh produce. More open space for the additional increase in FAR that we're seeing in a lot of places. And so right now in Long Island City and Midtown South, there are new programs that are adopted in those new zoning special districts that are going through review right now. Right now, the way it works is that for the most part, the residential plaza bonus we don't have anymore. We have lots of legacy POPs, but we don't have very many new residential POPs. And there are ways that in Long Island City that they are reviving that program to allow for POPs with certifications. And then more elevators at subway stops. So expanding the transit bonus to go further, which we did in Elevate Transit in 2021, and MSMX also has a bonus expanding the bonus for subway improvements. DCP says that this initiative is being launched in 2025 with more details to be announced soon. Stay tuned. All right, so yeah, that's another big text amendment that will be coming. All right, number 3, fair housing. So what is fair housing? It's a plan designed to ensure that everyone has access to housing regardless of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, family status, or disability. And there are 2 efforts going on right now. There's the 2025 update to Where We Live, which is the administration's, the city's fair housing plan. And then a new fair housing plan that was authorized by City Council called the City Council's Fair Housing Framework is in the works. And so why? I think it's fairly obvious to affirmatively further fair housing. But I think more, just as importantly, is City of Yes for housing opportunity was justified in part by Where We Live. They said, we are doing these zoning text changes because of what Where We Live says. The fair housing framework that City Council is going to do is going to set up housing targets by community districts. And those housing targets are going to almost certainly be used to justify future upzoning. So Community District 8 is going to get a target for the number of housing units that have to be created over a set period of time. How are those housing targets going to be met? And that's going to be a subject of future actions. So fair housing is going to be very important in terms of setting up future zoning actions throughout the city. And that is happening right now. The planning for this is done. The Where We Live effort, it just finished up its community engagement and hearings. The draft plans are being developed right now. All right, number 4. Introduction 1107, or what I call the Airbnb for NYC. So what is it? It's a city bill, not zoning, that would create a local law to permit short-term rentals in 1- and 2-family homes when the owner is not present. It would also permit up to 7 unrelated university students to occupy a single or 2-family home. And it does this, it's a local law that does a series of changes to the building code and administrative code to make it legal. Because right now it's not. And why? Well, it provides property owners ways to create income for their single and 2-family homes using short-term rentals. And as probably most people here know, short-term stays in residential buildings through Airbnb is now very limited in multiple dwellings in New York City. This is a way around that because single and 2-family homes are not multiple dwellings and so could be rented on a short-term basis. So it must pass before the end of the year, which is when the current session expires. In Community District 8, there are a fair number of single and 2-family properties. There are 1,055 of them. About 25% of the entire Manhattan total are in Community District 8. There are 8 sponsors in City Council for this legislation, about 16% of the total. None of your local council members, no Community District 8 council members are sponsors, but Diana Ayala in East Harlem is a co-sponsor, so nearby, right on the other side of the boundary. So I don't know if this is going to pass or not. I mean, I talked to somebody who's much more knowledgeable than me. They say, well, who knows? It could come back, but it's not being actively discussed right now. So it was much more discussed earlier this year. Some people on this call may know more than me. Okay. Now we're going to get into the meat of this. That's essentially the broad overview of the 4 things that are still pending. We are going to get into some detail on the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, and the Charter Review Commission. All right, so Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, what is it? A state bill that would suspend local zoning for development sites controlled by religious corporations developing mixed income or affordable housing. Instead of local zoning, it would permit qualified sites to use any zoning district that is located within 800 feet of the qualifying site. And any development would not require any environmental review. So it would exempt development that's one of these qualified sites from environmental review. And, it's being done to create more development sites for affordable housing. And the exemption would apparently save some costs for the developer for environmental review and mitigation. And so when is that happening? Well, it's the legislative session is right now. They're in session. The current legislative session ends on June 12th. It has a lot of sponsors, though, so this may be something we'll be seeing more of. So let me talk about this a little bit, because to me, this was a very surprising bill to see, because as most of you know, most of New York City's bill form, especially in Manhattan, is defined by buildings of different sizes depending on the width of the street. So what we're seeing here is an aerial view looking south between 1st and 2nd Avenue. You have the high density buildings on 1st Avenue, high density towers on 2nd Avenue. You have low density mid blocks. You look in the distance and you see some taller buildings in the mid blocks. Well, that's 86th Street, right? 86th Street is another wide street. The narrow streets have smaller buildings. The wider streets and avenues have taller buildings. And that's not an accident, right? that has been determined by zoning since 1916, right? We had the 1916 resolution used street widths to determine when the buildings must first set back. Most of Community District 8 was in a 1.5 district. And so, you see a lot of 150-foot tall buildings like on 86th Street because that's 1.5 times the width of 86th Street. Our current zoning is more specific about where tall buildings are allowed, but it follows this pattern, right? Where you have high density on the avenue and low density, or on the wide streets, I should say, because we have high density on 86th Street and 79th Street. And then lower densities in the mid blocks, the R8B for the most part. And so the faith-based affordable housing ignores this form. And I'm going to read it to you. It says, if the covered site is located within 800 feet of a zoning district that permits a height or density for residential use greater than what is otherwise provided in this paragraph, then the city shall allow residential buildings on the covered site up to the maximum height and density permitted in such zoning district. So in other words, the avenue zoning can move 800 feet in any direction if it's a qualifying site. And there are no blocks on the Upper East Side that are more than 800 feet wide. And so this would eliminate the distinction between wide street and narrow street zoning on the Upper East Side and really nearly all of the Manhattan core. So we're going to look at a site. All right. So this is St. Stephen of Hungary, which is on the south side of 86th Street between 1st and York. Now, the church, or at least according to Wikipedia, the church closed in 2015, but the school is definitely still open. Lots of students line up here every day as I see them walking my dog. St. Stephen is made up of 2 buildings and a vacant lot. The vacant lot, everyone on this call may know it's where the Upper East Side Farmers Market is on Saturdays. So under current zoning, the site can be developed as follows, where you could expand the underbuilt building to the east. You could do a residential building on the vacant lot up to 75 feet without any affordable housing. This is a typical building form that you see in the mid-block on the Upper East Side with universal affordability preference, what we just passed with the City of Yes. You could take them up to 95 feet with mechanicals. You could go taller than that. We're showing it 115 feet, something like this. You'd have to have affordable housing in the building, which we're showing in the taller building. Now, under the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, of course, is that you could move the 12 FAR district from the avenue into the mid-block. And so you could do a 12 FAR tower here, along with a separate affordable building to the east. In this case, what we're showing here is a 160-foot mid-block affordable building, a 700-foot market rate tower that would go onto the vacant lot. We leave the school there and expand it into the base of the tower so that it could be used to support the school's operations. And because it's a mid-block site, the tower on base rules that we have on the avenues do not apply. So you could do there's no bulk packing. It's not a thing in the mid-block site. So therefore you could do a standard tower that would be much taller than the avenue tower, 700 feet. That's a big change, right? I mean, we just spent an enormous amount of time talking about UAP and adopting UAP, and we went from this to this. Right? That's what City of Yes in part did, right? And then faith-based affordable housing would go to that. It's not an incremental change. It's a very big change.
George,
and it would produce. Yep.
Who's the primary sponsor of that bill?
Oh, it's got many. Gennardis in the Senate, but it's got
Andrew Gennardis from the 23rd District in South Brooklyn.
I believe that's right. Yes. But there's a whole bunch. I mean, it's got like 47 sponsors or something like that. It's it's got a lot. And let me also that's not all because there's more. It exempts development from environmental review. All right. It has this line in it. No environmental impact statement for a residential building shall be required if it conforms with the provision of this section. All right, so this is contrary to what the technical manual, the secret technical manual says, which requires environmental review for large zoning changes because, quote, because the city's sewers are sized and designed based upon the designated zoning for an area, right? So the pipes that are under the ground, the water, the sewer, all of the infrastructure, like they're sized based in part upon the density of the zoning density of an area. And if we're moving the zoning from one place to another, it has the potential to create impacts. And understand that the use of New York City's water and sewer system is as of right? If there's new development that requires new mains or sewage treatment plants or capacity in sewage treatment plants, it's the city. It's not the developer to have to provide and pay for it, right? Because you can hook up into the system as of right. And just because the development is exempted from environmental review doesn't mean there won't be environmental impacts. It just means they won't be disclosed or planned for. And so this is one that I was very surprised to see because you have the potential to actually create a lot more development on sites. And this is just on existing sites, not if you put these rules into effect, who knows what the religious corporations might acquire simply just be able to use these rules. And, I'm going to say a couple of things here because, to me, as a planner, I see Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act is actively hostile to home rule, local planning, and land use control controlled by local people, right? So local control of land use plans and zoning is a fundamental part of our system of local control of planning, right? We don't. That's what we do. We have it's the way we work in this state, and Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act would put that power in the hands of a single class of developers to overwrite local land use plans and zoning. And for New York City, yeah, we have our own way of doing things, right? We don't have the comprehensive plan and all that, but we just passed major changes to zoning, right? All three city of yeses, right? And we're working on all of these others to encourage more affordable housing. And the early data are suggesting that these efforts combined with 485X and other state subsidies are producing more affordable housing, right? And other local governments would probably like to do the same, but most can't because of the expense of updating their comprehensive plan and zoning, right? So, the state could provide subsidies to encourage local jurisdictions to amend their plans, to develop new zoning to encourage affordable housing. But, that costs money. It's a budget item. And Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act is quote unquote free because it doesn't stress the state's budget. But it needs to be said, this builds upon the concept of zoning for dollars, which I don't know. I think we talk about this a lot. The idea of using increased development rights to pay for things instead of taxes. And, that's not what zoning is designed for, right? Zoning is part of the police power. It's not designed to be used instead of taxes. But it ends up getting used that way often because it is politically easier to do it. But it's still contrary to the primary purpose of land use regulations. So it has 47 sponsors. The Faith-Based Affordable Housing has 47 sponsors and co-sponsors in the assembly, which is 31% of the total. And I'm going to imagine if it doesn't pass this year, it'll likely be revived in future sessions. It's a significant piece of legislation. It would produce a significant amount of affordable housing and new development, but it would also change the nature of development, the high on the wide streets, low in the mid block nature of development in New York City, which I think everybody needs to know about. I will also say this is that, working in zoning in New York City, I'm always cognizant or aware of the fact that you don't want to break it, right? And whenever you have a land use pattern that's been in place for over 100 years, you have to be very careful when you're doing something very different from that,
Um,
in my humble opinion.
George, not to interrupt, but just to let people know who sponsored it in the state Senate. I'm looking at it now. It's
Thank you.
Brad Hoylman Siegel, State Senator Hoylman Siegel is sponsoring it. Looks like our local Senator Brian Kavanaugh is supporting it. Jessica Ramos is supporting it. Our Senator Serrano is on the list. Kevin Parker is listed. Looks like Senator Gustavo Rivera is on there, and Zelnor Myrie is listed for those looking at the New York State Senate website, newyorksenate.gov, under Faith-Based Act. Just at a quick look.
Yeah, it has a lot of support. It's not like some of these which get, a handful of people. It's got a lot of people paying attention to it. But I also don't know how. Yeah, if people are so focused on the numbers, I'm not sure if anybody has done this exercise. Well, what does that mean? And at least I haven't until we did it. Okay. I will move on to the charter review commissions.
George,
Yes.
Could we, I think that this is a kind of, this might be a place to
Yeah,
pause
sure. That's fine.
for questions and comments. And before I let Adam talk, because of the rules we have here, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this right now? We can always, we'll loop back to it after. I just wanted to. Okay, we've got one person, two people. Oh no, one person. Yasmina Palumbo.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I mean, my first question when you state that it would avoid any environmental impact statement is, what does this mean for quality of life of Manhattan residents? And does the Green Amendment have any sway? I know it hasn't had any teeth yet, but don't we all have a right to a healthful environment? And if you have all these 600-foot developments happening concurrently, that is not a healthy environment.
George?
Oh, I'm not sure what's going on with the Green Amendment. I mean, listen, there's a lot of complaint about environmental review, and we're going to get into it. But, in my humble opinion, is you want to actually disclose and mitigate and plan for environmental review or environmental impacts prior to actually undertaking actions, because, things cost stuff, right? Like, whether it's money or congestion or water or sewer. And it's really important to actually understand what those impacts are and that everybody understands what they're getting into, right? I think exempting this from environmental review, essentially the state saying this one class of development doesn't have to follow its own laws. I just don't understand it. I don't understand why that's good policy. And maybe somebody who's smarter can explain that to me.
I don't think so. Okay, we have Leah. It looks like maybe Carnegie Hill Neighbors, Low, perhaps. And then Adam and DJ Folkson. So Leah first.
Hi, it's Leah. Do we know who is driving this? I mean, I'm not convinced that Senator Gunaris thought this up on his own. Maybe he did, but he would probably be trumpeting it more if he had. So is this coming from the churches or from someone in the city government who thinks this is a good way to get lots of affordable housing because the churches are less profit oriented, or who's behind this? It's huge, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, here's the thing is that I agree that this is actually enormous because it's also statewide, and there's going to be like effects in lots of places. And the thing is that it does affect different places differently. Like, for instance, on the Upper East Side, this is particularly impactful because of the way we have very high density next to low density, right? And not all places are like that. You have vast swaths of Brooklyn that are zoned the same zoning district regardless of their street width, right? And so it could be that people are just looking at their local areas and they're just not paying that close attention. But as far as, who else is behind this, I'm not a political person. I know that there's a lot of sausage making and people who are, being lobbied all the time with legislation. And, I don't know who's behind this. I'm sure there are lots of interests behind this, but I don't know. Maybe some other people on this Zoom know better than me.
George, just real quick, wasn't it a few years ago? Wasn't there a move? Maybe faith-based folks were behind it on transferring air rights, not beyond where we have it now, right? At Kitty Corner and adjoining lots. I think there was a move about 10 years ago to be able to transfer those air rights around. Maybe I'm misremembering, but
We've expanded the air rights transfers for landmarks, and a lot of these institutions are landmarks. And that we just passed, we expanded that with City of Yes for Housing Opportunity just in December. And so we expect a lot more of them will be doing that. But I don't know of anything that was specifically for religious institutions.
Okay, Carnegie Hill Neighbors.
well, Vanderwart.
Yes.
Yeah. This is Lo Vanderwalt speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. George, thank you for this presentation. You mentioned several times that this could obliterate the distinction between that we've been trying to maintain in general in zoning for the last number of decades, that we build high on the avenues and keep the mid blocks low. Can you elaborate that how this might adversely impact that concept?
Well, sure. This would allow any qualifying site, which means a site that is controlled by a religious corporation, to use the zoning with any zoning district within 800 feet. Considering that the blocks on the Upper East Side are generally no wider than 650 feet long, that means that essentially all of them, all the mid blocks could use avenue zoning. The avenue zoning on the zoning map is placed there to allow for towers on the avenue. There are a couple places like Yorkville Towers, Rupert Towers, where there is part of an urban renewal plan that has a mid-block tower there, but we don't have very many mid-block towers, right? We have a few based upon specific projects. But this would allow for mid-block zoning or avenue zoning to be placed into the mid-block, anywhere where there was a qualifying site controlled by a religious corporation.
Okay. Thank you, George. Adam, go ahead.
So this was a question, and thank you again, George. If I was an individual landmark and a faith-based organization sitting in the middle of the block, could I then say put a C19 zoning district on my parcel and then transfer landmark air rights using the C19?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it has to be with development, but you can't quote me on that. We have to actually look at the text with that question in mind, and I did not, but I'm not surprised you came up with it.
That would be wild. Just wild.
That would be wild.
Like transferring from the avenues to the mid blocks and then selling. Yeah.
So I mean, one of the things it has in there is that the development site needs to be wholly owned by the religious corporation. And so when we did our tower, we did not do it with the zoning lot merger because of that. However, the way the zoning works with zoning lot mergers, it says, either, in single ownership or through other methods, which often refers to zoning lot mergers. It's not clear to me whether zoning lot mergers would be permitted or not. But, with a big enough site, you don't need it. So there's
right.
That's a detail which we didn't get into.
You could do zoning lot mergers. You could do simultaneous ground lease and sublease to create, a fake zoning lot merger. There's all sorts of things. Okay, thank you.
Okay, DJ Faulkson. There you are. You're unmuted.
Yes. Hi, all. I'm a new member to CB8, but I think
Welcome.
I've met some of you, not all of you, but my first zoning development meeting. Just a couple comments on all the things that were shown. Thank you for the overview, George. That was really interesting. I didn't know about all of that, but it all kind of ties together a bit. The Upper East Side has been net flat on housing units. A lot of that's because of unit combinations that have happened on the mid blocks over time, which creates a lot of the 1 and 2 bedroom places that were shown on that Airbnb map. I don't know if they're going to become B&Bs, but that's where a lot of those come from. And that's the prerogative of the owners, of course, but it does lead to a reduction in housing over time, and it needs to be made up elsewhere or the rent goes up. We'll probably need to add more due to demand and due to the fair housing goals if, we get those put on the neighborhood. But you kind of see opposition to any densifying on the mid blocks whatsoever. We saw it just in the last few minutes. You also see an opposition to the towers that are being built on the avenues, and I think there's been a discussion of a special zoning district or something to limit the height of those as well. So I just don't know where the growth in the building is really supposed to happen. I should say I live on the block you were showing. I live on 82nd New York, so we're right there all the time. You showed the highest possible building that could go in, but I'm not against more housing being built on.
It's not. You could go higher. Absolutely. It's an unlimited height district. We just tried to keep a reasonably sized floor plate. If you went unreasonable, you could go taller.
It's a tall building. We'll see what happens if the law passes. I'll just say I'm not against more building on the block. Changes to zoning are happening because our zoning doesn't really support the needed housing growth. That's what we've been hearing at the city level, at the state level, because people want to live here. On the infrastructure, we always talk about it like it's kind of set in stone, but can't infrastructure change? Arguably that should be the job of city planners rather than enforcing zoning codes. Zoning is not planning. I don't always like talking about them in the same breath because they get kind of melded together, but those are different. And zoning can be antithetical to planning in many ways. You could argue let building happen a bit, see where the population's growing, and then let the city planners plan for it, including, building more sewer infrastructure. I don't think open-ended environmental review processes are good. They tend to just increase costs and don't have all that much great benefit. I'll stop there. Zoning hasn't been all that great, and it's causing a lot of the affordability problems, so that's why we see all the focus on it and all the changes.
Can I just say, I would say I don't disagree with some of that, but in terms of the infrastructure, one thing about New York City and particularly the Rock, as they call Manhattan, it's quite different from where I grew up in DC, especially Northern Virginia. Those in the real estate industry here know how much growth is going on out there. There, and like a lot of other places in these cities, you can just go. Like in DC, you just go down to Dale City. You just go down 95. But here, infrastructure becomes an issue. I mean, we try to build tunnels to help throughway on train transportation. That got blocked for 10 years by Chris Christie over there in New Jersey. We're finally getting around to building those two tubes that we need. And then with respect to the subway, my goodness, I mean, the glacial pace, I mean, with all due respect to the Sandhogs and everything, but I mean, it is plotting. So with respect to infrastructure, I would say to factor that in because it's just not as easy to put infrastructure into Manhattan because of all the layers, all the wires, all the tubes, and all that's gone before us. So there's a factor in there, and I would say that when you put up an 800-story building or 800-foot building, there'll be an impact on the water and the infrastructure that will be a long time coming to catch up. I just posit that out there.
And if I may, I just want to respond to say, there are almost no right answers when it comes to zoning, right? It's really about the vision that a community has for itself, right? And I think that it's always reasonable to revisit decisions that have been made in the past, right? You can't be stuck in the past. You always have to be looking forward. And making changes to zoning, I think, is completely reasonable. You got to modify your development regulations for the times you're in. But the most important thing I think is that people make decisions with their eyes wide open, right? And that's the thing that that probably, if I were to say what upsets me about this is, well, there are two things. One is, why am I making this drawing, right? Why didn't somebody else make this drawing to show what the impact's going to be, right? People need to be informed when they're making decisions. And then number two, and this is one that I think, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but why are we treating one class of developer differently than any other class of developer, right? I mean, why
Mhm.
is that good policy? Like, all right, if you're doing affordable housing, maybe you could say, all right, well, if you're doing affordable housing, you have to follow these rules. But religious corporations that are doing affordable housing have to do these rules, but then everybody else, those rules? I don't know. That just, it seems to be odd policy to me. And again, that's my opinion.
Thank you, George. I agree. Let's do Craig, then Marco, and then what we're going to do is we'll let George finish, and then we'll come back to members of the public. Okay, Craig.
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, George. Thank you for that presentation. That was extremely informative. I was not aware of any of this. I'll have some comments in a moment, but first, just a few quick questions. Have you done any type of preliminary assessment of what the extent of this change would be? Have you mapped out where the lots in which this potential change would actually be eligible for development? And are we talking an 800-foot radius, or are we talking about a linear 800 feet?
Okay, so on the first question, we have not made a map. I just picked this site because I knew it. I did pick through others. We did consider St. Joseph's on 87th Street, but we haven't made a map. And it is 800 linear feet. So any zoning district within 800 feet, I don't think it says linear. I think it says any zoning district within 800 feet of the site can use that higher density district.
Along the same set of roadways, or are we talking about a radius as the crow flies 800 feet where it could be encompassing a wide number of
Oh,
streets?
I mean, the way the language works, I mean, we can look at it. I'll text you the language later, but I think it's 800 linear feet. I think that's it's far.
Yeah. So I guess my comment is, and those who know me know that I often like to say that zoning is not etched in stone, and that the reason that we have community boards and we have a zoning process is because zoning does change or is worth considering changing over time. And I've certainly been one that has supported a lot of the recent initiatives to reform zoning, and I'm clearly not opposed to more density in many instances. However, I find this proposal quite eye-opening. It's a little scary to think about what the impacts of it could be and the way in which it really would essentially eliminate any local participation in the effort to be able to be impacting such plans. The idea that this would usurp any environmental review. Yeah, I think there's clearly an argument to be made that our environmental review process can be reformed because we take too long to see projects actually completed and delivered. But there is certainly a need for environmental review and for the state to just say we're going to bypass any environmental regulations in order to be able to speed up development. Yes, we have a housing crisis, but we don't. I don't think we should be taking such drastic measures to do things without any thought at all. And I agree with George, your comment that this, as a planner myself, this is antithetical to what to and an attack on planning and planners and the planning process. So I just wanted to put my thoughts out there on that. So thank you.
Craig, by the way, the law reads that it's just 800 feet. I found the section. It's just 800 feet. It doesn't say linear or otherwise. It just reads 800 feet.
And I would imagine we have more buildings than we even think we have in our community. And I'm not even just thinking about our community. I think on a citywide basis that this would be extremely impactful. And I'm glad that we're bringing this to light.
Yes. Thank you, Craig. I think Horrifying is the phrase that comes to mind as George was describing it, but that's just maybe it's just me more. Okay, so we've got Dylan, Marco, and Peggy, and then we will move on to
Okay.
the last item, George's last item.
Hey, so I don't want to reiterate too much. I think I largely agree with a lot of the points raised by a different DJ. So I don't want to go too far into those, but I do want to make a very quick comment on something we haven't talked as much about, which was the Airbnb bill. That also included a provision in it around allowing 7 unrelated college students to be able to live in the same 1 or 2 family home. I am, I think, like 5 years removed from having previously lived not in New York City, but as a 4th unrelated college person in an area where you were only legally allowed to have 3. And that was absolutely a housing cost issue. That was an unfortunate circumstance that I did because I didn't have as much family support for housing going through college. I had to pay for that all myself, so I had to keep that low. And having the ability to put 4 people in really helped with costs, but the existing rules created a lot of instability for me because I was not actually formally on the lease. And so that created a number of different issues for me when I needed to kind of show proof of address. And so I think fixing that, allowing a reasonable number of 7 in a 2-family home, that seems very fair, can go a long way to helping people kind of achieve more affordable housing for that kind of small population, while them not having to deal with the precariousness of an illegal living situation. So I know you spent a lot on the other, but I just really want to push my support for that specific provision as something I very recently kind of felt the consequences of, not in New York City, but a similar effect. So I just wanted to make my plea there that I think that's really helpful because people are going to do it anyway. And you kind of remove some of that instability that I had to deal with. So that's my piece there.
Thank you. Marco?
Thank you. Sometimes when people just are confused about the need of housing, any idea they presented to you, you catch it right away. That is the solution, and we want to resolve that way. And I think there is a manipulation in everything that the people does. And in reality, they don't go and help those people in need. That's what it is. Just only they go, in the case of the tower that George presented to us, it will be a wealthy tower. It's just only for the wealthy, not for the middle income or low income. No, it's just only for them. And the issue is next. The Airbnb, yes, coincidentally, I have a client that he has been penalized, a 2-family house, because he converted an Airbnb and he's making more than $100,000 a month. So is that housing? No, it's not, because they rent people from outside. They are no residents of our community. So that is wrong. It's just only to create facility for those 1 and 2 family to make money and do not resolve the problem of housing. Now, let's go a point that always I preach, density. Density looks like I don't know, people probably doesn't understand what is density. Density is the number of people that live in our community or in any community versus the area that are available. In the Upper East Side is the densest. It had more than 240,000 people in 2 square miles. So that means they have approximately more than 120,000 people per square mile. Let's go compare with the favelas in Brazil. That's 100,000 people lives in the favelas, just only 1 family house, 1 story. And this is a nightmare. So the Upper East Side is more or less exactly the same. The difference is, thank you for this grid that we have. Some wide street on the avenue and narrow on the streets. So the point is, you want to put more housing in the Upper East Side? No, the answer is not. Not because they don't deserve, it's because we have too many. While the other neighborhoods, they don't contribute in anything at all. So if we want to be fair, all the community has to contribute in the problems of housing. So the Upper East Side is already provide the most quantity of housing. That's what it means, density. So we cannot create more housing. The only way that we do is to eliminate low-income housing or affordable housing to move and gentrificate the community. That means an spatial segregation by income, rich people and poor people. Low-income housing in the poor neighborhoods and rich in the Upper East Side. I think it's wrong. That is lack of inclusiveness, and you have to create opportunities for all. If we have so many residents, we cannot push more the envelope because we already are saturated with that part. That leads directly with the issue of the infrastructure. And the infrastructure, basically, water, there is no problem in the city of New York. We have plenty. We can put as many people as we can. The biggest problem is the sewer system. That is the major concern, that you cannot put anything at all in any neighborhood because there's a negligence of the politicians organized and prepared for the big developments. And that's basically, if you compare, for instance, Grand Concourse. Grand Concourse, 6-story buildings, the whole, as much wider as Park Avenue. Why? And the regulation is Park Avenue are 10 versus there are other regulations, and Grand Concourse is R8. Why is this kind of the disparity? It actually is just only with the benefit that the developer wants to put money where is the real estate is sound. That's what it is. That's it. It's nothing more. And those people that are middle income housing, middle income believes that this kind of solution is going to be for them. No, they are wrong. They're not going to produce nothing for them. And so my concern is basically is this kind of solution is either they don't understand what are they doing, these decision makers, or they are in agreement with the developer to make money for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Just one infrastructure issue that we don't talk about. We talk about water, we talk about sewer. The one thing that we never talk about is internet access. And what is happening now in Manhattan is that everybody's internet has slowed down. And because of maybe just the Upper East Side, whatever, maybe just my block. But when I tried last week, I tried to get on the, and I did eventually get on the city planning, to testify at city planning on the on Lenox Hill, and I was constantly being thrown off, and that's a bandwidth issue where there just are too many people trying to access the internet. And it is any of you who have internet someplace other than Manhattan will realize when you think about it that it's much faster in the country than it is in the city. And it's not because the wires are better, it's because there are so many more people who are trying to access the internet. Peggy.
Yes, thank you. I would like to propose a resolution opposing the faith-based housing bill that's now in the state legislature. And I'd like to see if there's a second to that motion.
I see a couple
Marco?
of hands. I see a few hands.
Yeah,
That I think.
you can speak there, Peggy.
No, I think George and many of the people on this at this meeting have completely summarized the reason that it's really unacceptable for New York City. We can't speak about communities upstate, but it wouldn't work in New York City. And I really think we do have to speak out about it. So that's why I'm proposing the resolution. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Are there any committee members who want to talk about it or do we want to just Adam?
If we haven't seen the text of the bill and what we can and can't do, it seems a little presumptuous to vote against it when we don't even know what the mechanisms are, what the incentives are, whether this 800 feet then becomes 400 feet or 200 feet. Maybe it ends up, maybe there's some sort of carve out from Manhattan where they expand, C19, they'll say, oh, we can do another 100 feet in, and as opposed to 800 feet. I just think it's a little premature to vote
Premature.
on
Jerry appears to agree with
we don't know what it looks like.
By the way, Adam, I put a link for Kevin in the chat to the New York State Senate bill. So the text of the bill should be in the chat for everyone. Thanks, Kevin. So you put that in the chat for folks.
Well, where are we now?
I think we have.
We're just in committee,
Sherry.
as it were.
Yeah,
Okay.
committee. Wait, Sherry, I don't think is.
Yes, go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah.
I think that we've heard reasons why we should oppose this, and I would call the question.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, the question.
Yes, I'd like to second that, they call the question.
Okay, so the question has been called, and so members of the committee, I guess. So we should go through. I guess we have to do a roll call.
Do we?
Kevin, if you could.
Well, we have you, Anthony, Ed, Adam Wald, Craig Lader, DJ Falkson, Dylan Geronimo Kennedy, public member,
Right.
Gail Barron, John McClement, Kimberly Selway, Marco Tamayo, Peggy Price, Sherry Weiner.
Okay, so we should. That's more than. I think we have supposedly 18, 19 members. So I think that's more than half. So, okay. So how do we call it? Do you want, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Okay. Who's on? Is that me?
No,
Kevin?
Oh, so just one by one?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Okay. Adam?
No.
Craig?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay.
DJ?
No.
Dylan? Dylan?
Sorry, I was not allowed to unmute myself at first. I'm a no.
Gail?
Yes.
John?
Where'd John go? Oh, there he is.
He just unmuted.
Yeah, you're unmuted, John.
Yeah, I responded. No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Didn't hear you.
Kimberly?
Abstain.
Marco?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
So Ed
Yes.
and myself, I will also vote yes. I don't know how that worked out. Was that everyone?
I think that's everyone.
Yeah, that was everyone. How'd we do, Kevin?
well, I was not keeping track. Sorry.
All right. I
Okay, but Marco was keeping track.
Marco, thank you,
So
Marco.
the one thing I have noticed from my very first meeting.
Marco, can you unmute Marco?
All right.
Yes, I was following.
Thank
We have 4 no's, 2 abstention, and 6 yes. Tied. We don't is
So it's a tie, so that it's no.
Okay.
One thing we might want to do in the absence of being able to actually have a resolution on this, we might want to write a letter to our legislators as a committee that would, or from the chairs of the committee, that would express our concern and opposition to certain aspects of this.
we have to see we have to see if Valerie is willing to do that. But I agree with you.
But, yeah, I mean,
okay.
I'm with you, Anthony. What scares me about this, if I may, is that to George's point, and we'll move on to the charter stuff, is we didn't know much about it, and no one's out there certainly making falling over themselves to come to the community boards and show them all these nice drawings that George had. So what worries me particularly is now that we're past the budget, Lord knows with June 12th coming up, what will be happening in the late hours of June 9, 10,
Right.
and 11 before we can even really weigh in to any of this. But I know we don't have a position anyway.
Okay. Let's see, Craig, Gail, and then we're going to move on to George's charter revisions.
I just want to say that I abstained because I just didn't think that we were ready for it. And if there's a June 12th deadline, it's not as if the full board was going to have a chance to be able to consider this anyway. I would hope that I would hope that we could bring this back as a full-on agenda item at a future point, assuming that nothing happens in this current session, and be able to have it more properly noticed and have everyone allowed more time to be able to review it, and then we could hopefully have a better read on where we are and be able to have a more targeted resolution. Because even for someone like me who generally is opposed to it, I think there are enough details that I would want to flesh out and think about as far as a resolution went. So just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think that's a very good point, Craig. We wouldn't even be able to vote on it as a full committee. So I think perhaps maybe a general letter of concern. All right, so we'll work on figuring that out. Gail?
I wanted to support the idea of a letter of concern, but also asking for clarification. Because that way, if it's 800 feet linear, otherwise, means I think if we can look at it and come back with questions that are legitimate, because we don't want to suddenly look the other way, and before we know it, it becomes a reality, because things can happen that way. So I think that listing our concerns, or at least our query as to what's open-ended, where we need clarification, just makes sense. And I would hope that the co-chairs could write that letter. And if they need anybody else on the committee to look at it, I'm sure we all can.
Thanks, Gail.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gail. Okay, George.
Okay,
Charter
great.
revision.
Let me go back. All right. Okay, so charter review commissions, because there are two of them. All right, so both the administration, the mayor, and the city council have formed their own charter review commissions, right? So the city charter, it defines the rules for how the city of New York operates. ULURP, Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, is defined in the charter. And if you're going to make significant changes or to make significant changes to the charter, the commission is formed to develop recommendations, which will be voted on in November of 2025. So why? Real estate and housing interests want to streamline the land use process to make it faster and more predictable. And there is concern that the current land use process deprioritizes citywide needs over local desires. And when is this all happening? It's happening right now. Draft recommendations for land use have been released. They have held hearings. The last hearing, the Manhattan hearing, was a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, something like that, for the Mayor's Commission. And they have preliminary reports. There are links to all these documents in this deck, which I will provide to Kevin afterwards.
Right.
The recommendations will be finalized later this year, and be ballot proposals. These are just preliminary. And none of these are going to impact environmental review, building or construction standards, protections for historic district or landmarks. This is really about land use process, or at least, and also there's some stuff about elections and other things in here, but I'm just going to stick to land use. The Mayor's Commission involved these invited speakers as well as the public. The invited experts were sympathetic to the recommendations that were in the preliminary report. They went first. They were given more time. They included people like former Deputy Mayor Vicky Bean and former DCP Strategic Planning Head Howard Slatkin. And they provided very extensive comments. Howard provided a big written document about the process, which is worthwhile to go through. Additional public hearings have been scheduled for after this. So the earlier ones were really mostly focused on land use. These later hearings will be focused in on other things, but I think you can provide comments regarding the preliminary reports at these other hearings. The Manhattan one is July 7th, but these are all also virtual as well. So to remind everyone, we have ULURP actions, and then we have the ULURP timeline, right? And city map changes, zoning map changes, CPC special permits. You know what they are, but they also include things that you never see, like landfills and maps of subdivisions plattings, and in this community district, urban renewal plans. You never see those in this community district. The preliminary recommendations, I'm going to say, are not very specific. It lists a lot of things that may happen. So you can't go through this and say, well, they're going to recommend blah, right? Because they have a lot of couched language in it. And they report back on a lot of things that they heard during the hearing, but I'm going to group them into these categories: fast tracking ULURP, the roles within ULURP, categories of projects requiring ULURP, the concept of a zoning administrator. There's talk about comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the 10-year capital plan. They spend in the mayor's document, they spend a lot of time talking about member deference in city council, and then modernizing the city map. And I'm going to go through each of these relatively quickly. Okay, so fast tracking ULURP. So the Mayor's Commission discusses possible changes to the ULURP to reduce the process costs and to facilitate certain types of development. It introduces the idea of different levels of review, that large projects would take one path and small projects would take another path, which makes some logical sense, I think. It also suggests streamlining the review for categorically beneficial projects like 100% affordable housing. It introduces this concept of a zoning administrator office with the power to review certain defined categories of applications. So if you have different paths for large projects and small projects, you need different processes for this. It introduces the idea of the zoning administrator, which we'll talk about more later. In conjunction with fair housing targets, it creates a different review procedure, or it suggests different review procedures for housing developments in districts that fail to meet fair housing targets. Okay, roles within ULURP, right? So commissions are examining the possibility of amending roles that are played within the ULURP process, enhancing or some otherwise changing the role of officials like borough presidents or the speaker of city council. Right now, the speaker of city council is head of city council. They don't necessarily have a specific role in the process, but they're mentioned as having a different role going forward. The changing of timing, consolidating the advisory portion of ULURP from 90 days to 16 days. The idea there would be maybe doing concurrent borough president with the community board review. The possibility of moving city office space acquisition from the CPC to controller, taking that out of the ULURP process and either taking it out or just giving it over to the comptroller as opposed to the CPC. And then again, the new city administrator or the new zoning administrator role, creating that role. And then the categories of projects requiring ULURP. There's a suggestion that new processes for zoning changes that are specifically related to climate and infrastructure. There are some zoning changes that have to happen because of that, should take on a different role than housing for economic development. Zoning for economic development or housing. And then another process for disposition of public land. And there's this quote, ULURP's one-size-fits-all procedure forces the city to spend scarce time and resources on exceedingly modest changes. And I'm going to spend a little bit talking about disposition for publicly owned land just to try to illustrate this. So some city-owned properties are truly tiny. We're talking about little tiny scraps of land, and to dispose of them, the city needs to go through ULURP. To do that, it doesn't matter how big it is. There's no de minimis size. And there's a recommendation to streamline. There's also a recommendation to streamline the disposition to activate public land for affordable housing and other uses. So if you're disposing a vacant lot for public land, does it need to go through the same process as other ULURP actions? And I made this map a bunch of years ago, and it's really hard to see, I'm imagining, but there's a ton of tiny little red dots on this. So these are city-owned parcels that were taken for back taxes before 1997. We don't do that anymore, right? That's not a thing anymore. We use tax liens. But the city used to take property, and very often these lots are not developable. What used to happen, and actually still happens, is sometimes zoning, people will subdivide a parcel and cut off a little tiny piece of it, sometimes 3 inches wide, to avoid some zoning regulation. And what happens to that land? Often isn't productively used. And so the idea here is that, if you want to actually do something with these tiny little scraps, might there be a better way of actually disposing of them or putting them to a more productive purpose than ULURP? It's a fair observation that people are considering. All right, number 4, the zoning administrator. The Mayor's Commission explores the idea of the zoning administrator office. I've already mentioned this, and it's worthwhile to talk about a little bit because this would be an entirely new mechanism, right? Right now we have the BSA, we have zoning changes with the CPC and city council. And this would be something entirely new where you would set up this administrative office where smaller developments or small changes, like maybe expanding a commercial overlay or similarly small actions. It mentions the idea of up to 6 units and buildings up to 35 feet in height would fall into this kind of administrative office as opposed to having to go, through city council and the planning commission. It being an entirely new mechanism, I think it's worthwhile to mention that people are discussing it. There's a fair amount of discussion of comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the 10-year capital plan in both the City Council Commission recommendations and in the mayor's recommendations. There's more on comp planning and fair housing in the City Council Commission's reports. They're suggesting explore entirely new 197A community planning rules. As probably most of you know, there's this process in section 197A of the charter discussing how community boards and other city agencies can develop plans. There hasn't been a new 197A plan adopted in New York City, I think, since 2008. It's a process that when it was first adopted, there were a number of them, and then they've kind of gone away due to the difficulty of actually doing them. And so they're talking about making changes to 197A plans and also getting DCP to assist community boards in the development of 197A plans. Council is also talking about requiring agencies, including the community boards, to incorporate fair housing and housing targets into the planning process. Remember, the fair housing process that the council is coming up with will be assigning every community district housing targets that it has to meet. And so actions and local plans have to be responsive to those housing targets. That's what the recommendation is. And then exploring charter amendments to increase the number of votes the CPC needs to approve applications that are disapproved by the community board and the borough president. The idea here is a supermajority. So if the community board votes against it and the borough president votes against it, you can't just have a simple majority at the CPC to pass it along. You'd have to have some kind of supermajority to advance it. Okay, number 5. This is still the comprehensive planning and fair housing, but the mayor's commission is much vaguer about elevating citywide needs in the land use process. It actually does discuss the possibility of comprehensive planning, but it really does so really talking about testimony they received from Brad Lander and Borough President Reynoso. It doesn't dismiss it, but it couches comprehensive planning in careful language. It does talk about testimony it received about imposing a fair share housing requirement using models from other jurisdictions, and examines how the capital planning process set out in the charter may need to change to ensure that investments in infrastructure are made in concert with new housing and new zonings to support new housing. The mayor's commission talks a lot about member deference. And when I say member deference, it's when there is a local land use action, the city council, all 51 members normally defer to the local member, and that is known as member deference. And it identifies member deference as a barrier to development in certain areas and the challenge of balancing citywide goals versus local priorities. But member deference is a convention, right? It's not in the charter. It's just what the city council does by convention. And there are no specific recommendations for a charter amendment for it, but there is this kind of vague suggestion as to changing the role of the city council speaker and the borough president, which may ultimately end up in the final recommendation having something to do with impacting member deference, but that's speculation on my part. And then finally, modernizing the city map, right? What is the city map? Well, changing the city map is a ULURP action. Whenever you change the city map, this is a little bit of it between York and East End. This is the East River over here. It's the street widths, it's the block widths, it's the elevation of the curbs, right? What is the elevation of the curb? So if you engineer your site to raise your elevation, you're still governed by the curb elevation of the city map, and the city map is a to change any number on this is a ULURP action. It's recommending centralizing the management of the city map from the borough presidents to DCP. Right now, the different boroughs manage this very important data element differently. And it's, going out to Queens, you're working all on paper, and in Manhattan, you do have it partially digitized. But consider citywide, so put it into the hands of DCP. They've been doing a lot of really good technology, and leave it up to them to digitize it and make it uniform across the city. And then, I think it begs the question of, do all city map changes need to be ULURP actions? If you're changing the curb elevation because of a survey or because of increases in elevation, should that be a ULURP action? It's an open question. I have a commentary just on a couple of things. There's a lot of focus in ULURP time, but speaking from experience, that's really nothing compared to pre-ULURP time. So ULURP has this set timeline of basically 7.5 months. It's the pre-ULURP, before you even get to ULURP, that often takes years before ULURP starts. And if you're talking about improvements, that's the low-hanging fruit, right? And I think you can't paint them both with the same brush. I think some comments are overly general. For instance, I'm going to read a line from the mayor's report. Today, ULURP frequently requires the same costly multi-year process of environmental and land use review for an 8-unit apartment building as for an 800-unit apartment building. As such, ULURP applications tend to be for big changes rather than small ones. I review a lot of ULURP applications, and there are tiny ULURPs all the time. This one on 2nd Avenue was to extend a commercial overlay 55 feet. This one on 124th Street was to change parking requirements in a special district that affected a few lots. And this one on the Upper West Side, I did. I did this application myself to expand the special district part of one block. They happen. Yes, ULURP is an expensive process, especially if it's a big ULURP and there's a big environmental review. But there are lots of tiny ULURPs. You just have to pay attention to them. They happen. Should they be a process to make them faster? That's a completely legitimate question. But it's not just big things that go through ULURP. Finally, there's no discussion of increasing review times for very large process. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, 1,386 pages of zoning text. It followed, while it wasn't a ULURP action, it was a text amendment, but they still adopted the standard ULURP timeline for it. Should you have more time for enormous things like that than you do for a one-line change? That seems to make sense to me. There's no mention of different review times depending on the complexity of the project, which would make a lot of sense, I think. The Mayor's Commission report shows little appreciation for how projects can improve because of local input during the process. And that's why we do it, right? We want to make projects better by hearing from local people. And I think there's not a lot of time spent on that. the mayor's commission report is, I think it's surprisingly vague with few very specific recommendations. That's just the way that it was written. And a lot of time was spent on member deference. And I think you're going to see something in a specific proposal that comes out of the end of the pipe that's going to address it. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I can imagine a process that will remove or weaken member deference going forward. And then in terms of what's next, there are hearings that will be going on with these. You could submit written testimony, either based upon the hearings that they'll be doing over time or based upon the preliminary recommendations that have been published. And then, the community boards or community-based organizations developing broad board resolutions, investigating how these changes could impact specific projects and processes, right? Investigate it, right? Look and see, develop your own recommendations for how you think ULURP should change. And then maybe consider community education for ballots proposals once they've been formed, right? There will be ballot proposals that will be coming out of this process. Is there a way of educating people on what they mean and what they will mean for the process? That's all I have.
Terrific. Thank you so much, George. Okay, let's start with members of the public. I see we have Yasmina again, and then we'll go to the board. Go ahead.
Yeah, going back to the faith-based amendment, extremely disconcerting to hear any community board member dismiss the need for an environmental review. And related, this is a question to the co-chairs, how seriously conflicts of interest are taken at our community board. But if I'm going online, it says community board members may not vote on any matter that could result in a personal and direct economic gain for themselves or any associated person, business, or not-for-profit organization. So I would assume that that would mean anybody here who's affiliated with housing development should probably not be voting on a resolution for or against. If you could respond to how seriously these conflicts of interests are taken, I do believe people should identify themselves before voting. And I'm not affiliated with any such right. Group. I'm just a resident who would like my environment to be healthy.
Well, go ahead, Ed.
Well, I was going to say, we just had an executive committee meeting on this very topic. And so we went over the rules very clearly on that. And with respect to a financial interest, it's a direct financial interest. Just because you may work in the real estate industry does not necessarily preclude you from voting on this particular matter. It does get I can say that it is part of what I do this in my day job for elected and people running for office. So it is very direct. It has you have to have a direct impact financially. And this is with respect to the faith-based vote. I don't think, given as large as it is, I just think it's too wide necessarily. I mean, one person's humble opinion. I think it's just too wide as opposed to necessarily like voting on, say, that particular lot. Like, we're voting on, say, whatever the lot is, and pick a street. What were we talking about? 82nd Street? Forgive me if I forgot, right? If you like if you have like 50% of that lot, I mean, that becomes an issue. So with respect to that, I mean, that's just my view of it. So if anybody who's working in real estate or has a tangential interest with it.
But for this particular resolution, it's fairly wide. And if you can generally benefit from housing development, I think if you're a community board member, you should probably identify yourself as benefiting from that. If anyone's affiliated with Open New York, perhaps, I just don't, I don't feel like, 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 I don't f I certainly don't feel represented as a community member to have any board member argue out of the gate against the need for environmental impact reviews.
Okay, I think Ed is right. Look, I'm an architect, and I could, as is Marco, and I could if I were a different person or had a different practice, I could in fact profit from a church coming to me to design a building for them. And so, but that does not preclude my voting on this wide-ranging resolution. So I think that.
Right. I mean, Sherry, I think, works in real estate. She's an attorney, right, Sherry? I mean, your practice area includes real estate. And I know Adam, Adam is, quite he works in real estate.
It has to be specific. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
You know.
I would say if there were a member of this committee or the community board who in fact were a head of a faith-based organization that stood to profit from this, that would be a little different. I think otherwise we're all too vaguely connected. Okay, so let me go to Lo and then to Sherry and Marco.
Yeah, Lo Vandervalk speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. George, could you elaborate on member deference when it is mentioned that the specific phrase is not actually mentioned in any of the legal proposals or changes in zoning proposals? Am I clear on that? Can you clarify?
Well, it's mentioned. It's discussed at some length in the mayor's preliminary findings on the commission, right? The Charter Commission's findings. But the act of member deference is a custom, right? It is what council members do. Council members defer to the local council member, knowing that believing that the local council member knows best. The mayor's report says that this is a problem because it gets local concerns effectively trump citywide concerns. And it lists a bunch of actions that were changed because of member deference. And, it says that it's a problem. But it also then says it's a custom. It's not something that they can change directly because of the charter. But again, I think they're going to try to, it all suggests that they're going to try to increase the role of others in the process to lessen the custom. But, who knows whether that'll work or not.
Yeah, I think a good example of there being no member deference was the Blood Center.
That's right.
Which was opposed by our councilman, and he was not deferred to.
That's right.
Anyway, Sherry.
The board members know that, and wanted to let George know that Community Board 8 does have a task force on the Charter Commission, the revision.
I did not know.
So Ed and I actually co-chaired it. We did, because there is, yes, there are two commissions, but the mayor's commission takes preference, so that we're not going to, the only things on the ballot this November will be from the mayor's commission. And I can see why they'll be talking about council deference, because they want to give more support to the mayor. But I wanted we did comment originally, the entire board voted. We did pass resolutions originally on the, without the preliminary report, and on our comments and resolutions which were forwarded apropos to ULIP were two of the three resolutions. One is that because the community boards do not meet in July and August, that any application that comes in, the review clock for any application for the community board, I'm sorry, which is 60 days, should not start until September. So in other words, if an application comes in July when the community board doesn't meet, we have an extra 30 days to review it. And the other apropos resolution was that if they do make any revisions to ULUP, that the role of the community board should not be diminished. We left that purposely very broad because we don't know what they're proposing, but we want to make sure that the community board, which is the voice of the community, obviously, that we should still have part of it. So we're on top of it.
Great.
And we're waiting to see, what happens next. But I wouldn't be surprised if they talk about deference, because I could see the mayor. I mean, let's talk real politics. These people were appointed by the mayor, so they're going to do whatever they can to strengthen his role.
But by the way, quick plug for the meeting. Sherry and I co-chair the Voting Reform Charter Revision Task Force. We're meeting in June and July. We had the 17th for June picked. We're going to have to change that date. So for those of you on the call, we'll figure out a date tonight after this meeting. But it'll be next month and the month after. So please stay tuned.
If I could just say, you are ahead of a lot of other boards. Most other boards don't even know this isn't on their agenda.
And as I said, George, at the full board last week when we were talking about this, is that we expect, look, nothing is finalized yet. I personally, my personal opinion is we will talk about this again in September, because it will be then we'll finally actually know what it is that they're going to do. I mean, then we'll actually have something real anyway.
Yeah.
Marco.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Sherry. Marco.
Thank you. Anthony, allow me to answer a little bit about Mrs. Palumbo. She's right what she read. You are not wrong. We have every year mandatory training in conflict of interest, and we are fully aware of that. And basically what it says is, in the event that you have conflict of interest, you have to first disclose, discuss, and do not vote. That is the rule. So I think most of the members understand very well that rule. Some of them not. But I don't know who are they. And the only situation is I was the person that asked to have this kind of training, especially in Robert rules, because I'm seeing that is unorganized, and the idea is to work as a democratic meetings. It's not one-way meetings. I think that's in my direction, my way of thinking. And thank you so much for bringing that part. And finally, let me give you. I had a possibility to present the project, and then carefully I said, let me follow the recommendation of the of this organization, which is the conflict of interest. I called them. I explained the case. They didn't answer to me. I had to wait 3 days. At the third day, he came back to me and he said, listen, you shouldn't do that. So we still a lot of help from the conflict of interest. If some member doesn't follow, that will be the problem. But yes, we would like to be clear with the public. Now, with respect to the ULURP, I mean, I was lucky to see the interview of the chair of the City Charter Commission, which basically, in the way that he expressed himself, he said, well, we listen the developer, we listen the city council, even the former city council, and some of them, some members of the community also they intimidate to kill them. So I mean, then I said, well, they did a very well job. But the only situation is you had to create a theoretical frame in order to make the study. And they missed because it's either this chair of the City Charter Commission believe that we are naive or he is naive. The developers always they're gonna take advantage of that. The developer, they never going to develop the best lot for the benefit of the community. They always is gonna start looking the worst lot. So then the best lot, he can profit more. That is the strategy usually in the development. I do development too, so I understand very well that part. So the point is, we have to be fair. If you want to receive money from the government, yes, I think it's fine. It's good because the private developers, they do very well, better than the city. I agree with that part. But the city, and especially the community board, have a role to put an input to be fair, actually, with the community. Actually, the money that they're coming for this development should be served the entire community and to be inclusive. That's basically is my point. Is not to just give it to the developer to create rich housing. I'm not against rich housing, by the way. I strongly support that part. I strongly support middle income housing and low income housing. It depends what is the situation. In this case, the chair made me think that he doesn't understand what he's doing, or if he understands, he thinks that we are naive in his comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I don't see anybody else. So we're going to move the agenda, and agenda item 2 is a statement. And thank you so much, George. You may or may not want to hang on
Thank
here.
you.
My pleasure.
And listen to Adam's brief report on our rezoning effort. Adam, once you are unmuted.
Sorry.
Still mute. Oh, there you go.
There he is.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you, Anthony. And again, thank you, George. That was wonderful. So I, along with my co-chair, Elizabeth Rose, run the task force for residential rezoning. For those of you who are not familiar, it is a task force aimed at seeking to rezone C8-4 and M14 portions of Community District 8. Those zoning districts do not currently permit residential development as of right, and we are trying to promote development of residential housing through a rezoning. So we had, 8 meetings, 9 meetings, and then it was unanimously approved by the full board to push this effort forward. And so last month, and in order to push this forward, we had a meeting with some members of Department of City Planning, Azka Muhyiddin, Eric Botsford, and Nabila Malik. And we had a productive meeting. We told them what our process was, about the meetings, about the input we received, and the feedback we received during each of the meetings, and how that formed what our final resolution was presented to the board and voted on by the board. They were happy that the initiative is coming out of Community Board 8, and they felt that we were doing the right thing. They, of course, as I anticipated, had some questions about implementing some of the new tools coming out of City of Yes into this rezoning, and they alluded to R11 and R12 zoning districts. We told them that that was not something that we had received a lot of fanfare from the various people who attended our meetings. They were not in love with super high density zoning districts, and that's why the districts we chose are the districts we chose. So bringing that to what we're doing now and what our next steps are. Their feedback was we need to perform a more detailed soft site analysis, and we have all the information to do that, so that's what we're working on now. And they want to use that to get an idea of what are the true target development sites that can be developed sooner than later, and what the number of housing units coming out of those development sites would likely be. Second, they felt that because Department of City Planning has itself some limitations about how many neighborhood-wide rezonings they can take on per year, they felt that this was something that, while they want to see happen, it's not something they can do at the moment. So oftentimes, Department of City Planning will take an effort like the Manhattan Plan or the MSMX rezoning, and they will push it through. But they said that each of the boroughs really only has the ability to do one neighborhood-wide rezoning per year. So they suggested that for now, we create a framework where individual development sites could be rezoned in accordance with that framework. So for any of those who are familiar, the M Crown, which was a zoning framework on Atlantic Avenue that was passed by Brooklyn Community Board 8 many years ago. And then you saw, once that was passed, you saw individual applicants file to rezone sites one by one. And it created a little bit of a pockmarked land use along Atlantic Avenue. That has now obviously resulted in the AAMUP, the Atlantic Avenue Mixed Use Program. So it went from framework to individual rezonings to now a full neighborhood-wide rezoning action that the city's pushing through. And they also said that we should wait until the Manhattan Plan comes out to see how we can be folded into the Manhattan Plan. As George talked about, the Manhattan Plan is an effort to spur the development of 100,000 units over the next decade. MSMX and 100 Gold Street are the first two major initiatives that are part of the Manhattan Plan. And they felt that once the Manhattan Plan comes out, that we could be kind of folded into that if our framework idea didn't work. And another issue that came up, and this is not to discuss now, it could be just to discuss at another time, given the hour, is money. So if we're going to lead this initiative, it costs money to do it. And expert planners like George or land use attorneys or just bodies on the ground, it takes a lot of effort to put a formal application together. So that when they introduced the concept of the Manhattan Plan, I think they were trying to tell us, they're saying, hey, it's going to be expensive to do this, but if you wait to see what happens with the Manhattan Plan, maybe you'll see how your initiative can be folded in, I guess, more at the expense of the city as opposed to our own individual expense. So our immediate next steps are to complete our soft site analysis, identify the most likely sites, and count the housing units that can be developed there, and discuss how this could be funded depending on which path we decide to take, and to roll that into where the Manhattan Plan puts us in the greater context of this 100,000 unit initiative. That's all
Thank
I
you,
got.
Adam. No, that was a lot. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're going to ask for.
No questions? No?
Oh, Marco.
Yes. Well, this question was made when they start the program. Where is going to be the money? Because Community Board 8 stopped our application to protect the building, to limit the building height to 210 with potential to go to 230 with affordable housing. And somewhere, I don't want to blame nobody, but somewhere this good intentional program disappeared and vanished. So that was exactly my point when they came with this idea of this project. Well, good luck. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Good luck.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Is there any old business? Moving right along. Seeing none, is
Thank
there
you,
any
George.
new business? Also none. I wonder if anyone is interested. Marco, yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
I see
Any-
Gail raising her hand, I think, to second that.
Okay.
I see big nodding.
No. Thank you very much. Thank you once again, George. That was magnificent. And we really appreciate, we're all sort of applauding, some of us more noisily than others. Thank you again. And if you could give Kevin your slides, we can make good use of them. All right. Well, thank you. The meeting is adjourned, and we will see you all next month.
Thanks, Ann.